You're drooling on the pillow right now. Not you specifically at this exact second, but somewhere on this planet, in a tent, in a cabin, on the bare ground. Someone exactly like you is lying there completely unconscious. Mouth open. Muscles slack. Not one part of your body is defending you. If a leopard decided tonight was the night, you would not wake up in time to do anything about it. And yet you did wake up this morning. And the morning before that, every single morning of your entire life, across millions of camps, across thousands of years of humans sleeping in places, crawling with animals that could kill us in seconds, we keep waking up every time. So, here's the question that should genuinely bother you. Why would a lion, an animal that can drop a fully grown, wide-awake sprinting buffalo, walk straight past a human doing absolutely nothing to defend itself? On paper, that makes no sense at all. And the real answer isn't one clean explanation, it's a stack of them. Some of what's coming is going to change how you see every night you've ever slept. Let's start with a number that should honestly terrify you a little, except it's working entirely in your favor. In 2015, biologist Chris Derrimont and his team at the University of Victoria published an analysis in the journal Science, pulling data from over 2,000 predator-prey relationships worldwide. What they found, humans kill adult prey animals at rates up to 14 times higher than any other predator alive. 14 times. And when it comes to hunting other carnivores specifically, animals that could actually fight back, we do it at 9 times the rate of any natural predator on Earth. Most hunters go for the weak, the young, the slow. We do the opposite. We take the strongest, healthiest adults over and over for thousands of generations. Scientists gave this an actual name, not a nickname, a published classification, the human super predator. And here's the part that should make the hair on your arms stand up. Every predator alive right now is descended from ancestors who watched their boldest relatives disappear. One hunting trip at a time at our hands. That's not folklore. That's inherited memory written directly into instinct. So flip the story you grew up believing. You think of yourself as the vulnerable one out there in the dark. Nature disagrees violently, but it's not only what we do to predators directly, it's what our mere presence does to their nervous systems before a single shot is ever fired. In 2019, ecologist Justin Sarasi, working with researchers Michael Clinchy and Liana Zanet at UC Santa Cruz, ran an experiment that sounds almost too simple to matter. They hid speakers across mountain lion territory in California and played 2 different sounds, barking dogs and ordinary human conversation. Nothing aggressive, just people talking. The mountain lions fled from human voices at the same rate they fled from dogs, and in some cases, faster. Some of them ran away from a kill they had already made, walked off, left fresh meat behind, just to get distance from the sound of us chatting. An apex predator capable of dragging a full-grown deer up a tree, hearing a podcast-level conversation, and deciding the food isn't worth the risk. That's not caution. That's closer to panic. It's not only mountain lions either. A separate study in 2016 measured fear responses in badgers, animals that already share territory with wolves in parts of Europe, and found their fear of the human voice was stronger than their fear of any actual predator sharing their forest. We are, biologically, scarier than the things that are supposed to be scary. You might assume, then, that this makes every predator an opportunist too cautious to ever take a real risk. That's actually backwards, and it's worth correcting before we go further. A predator with an injury doesn't get a hospital visit. One bad decision, one broken tooth, one torn muscle can mean a slow death by starvation weeks later, far from the moment of the mistake. So every single attack a predator considers isn't driven by hunger first, it's driven by arithmetic first. What's the chance this goes wrong, and what does wrong actually cost me? Hunger only gets a vote after that math clears. Now, picture the smell coming off your skin right now, because this is where it gets strange in a way almost nobody talks about. Run your hand down your arm. That thin film of sweat covering nearly every inch of you didn't come from panic or heat alone. Humans carry somewhere between 2 and 5 million sweat glands spread across almost the entire body, an arrangement that barely exists anywhere else in the animal kingdom. Deer don't have this. Wolves don't have this. Most mammals cool off through panting or through a completely different, oilier gland buried in fur. Scientists who study this believe our version evolved so our ancestors could chase animals for hours under an open sun, not by outrunning them in a sprint, but by simply refusing to overheat while the prey eventually did. Nobody has run the experiment of putting a modern predator in a room and asking whether that specific chemical signature makes it hesitate. But it's hard not to notice the shape of the coincidence. The very sweat that makes you smell foreign to a predator's nose is a leftover piece of the exact machinery that once let your ancestors run prey into the ground. So stack what you've got so far. A species with a measured reputation as the deadliest hunter on the planet. A fear response so extreme it beats the fear of actual predators. And a body chemistry shaped by a hunting method no predator alive was ever built to recognize as danger, let alone as food. And yet, there's still one detail that should genuinely unsettle you, because everything so far assumes the predator can tell it's dealing with a human at all. In the Sundarbans, the vast mangrove swamp straddling India and Bangladesh, tigers have killed hundreds of fishermen and honey collectors over the decades. Researchers studying the pattern found something consistent. Tigers almost never attack a person facing them. They strike from behind, nearly every time. It turns out tigers are deeply reluctant to commit to an attack against something that appears to be watching them back. So villages started making human face masks and wearing them backwards on the back of the head to trick approaching tigers into believing they were being watched. For years, in villages that adopted this, attacks measurably dropped. Now here's the question that should be sitting in your stomach. When you're asleep, your eyes are closed. Your face is turned away, buried in a pillow, pressed into the dirt. By the tiger's own logic, you are not being watched. You are, by every rule we just laid out, exactly the target that should trigger an attack instead of preventing one. So why doesn't it? Part of the answer isn't in your eyes at all. It's in your brain's plumbing. Deep in the brainstem sits a structure called the reticular activating system, a kind of relay station deciding moment to moment which incoming signals are worth waking the rest of the brain up for. It doesn't switch off while you sleep. It turns into a filter instead. The wind you've been hearing for hours gets waved through in silence. A footstep with the wrong rhythm doesn't. A smell that doesn't belong gets flagged and shoved upward, toward the surface, toward waking. Your closed eyes were never the only thing standing guard. There's a whole switchboard running underneath them, wide awake while the rest of you is dark, quietly deciding what's worth dragging you back for. Then there's fire, and the usual explanation that animals are simply born afraid of it only tells part of the story. Watch a predator's eyes at night and you'll see them glow, thanks to a mirror-like layer behind the retina called the tapetum lucidum, which bounces available light back through the eye for a second pass. It's what gives them their extraordinary night vision, and it's also, it turns out, a weakness. Hunters and wildlife researchers have long known that a strong, direct light overwhelms that same reflective layer, which is exactly why spotlighting works to freeze or disorient nocturnal animals after dark. Nobody has run this test on a campfire specifically, but the mechanics line up almost too well to ignore. The tool that lets a predator see you clearly in the pitch black stops working the moment it gets close enough to the flame to use it. Step toward the light, and the very thing built to help it hunt you starts working against it instead. And then there's the group. Predators don't hunt herds. They hunt the separated individual because an isolated animal can't trigger a coordinated response. A campsite full of sleeping humans isn't isolated targets. It's a unit that turns into total chaos the moment one member wakes up screaming. And chaos, to a predator making a risk calculation, is the single most expensive outcome on the table. But theory is easy to believe from a distance. Here's what it actually looks like when that exact mechanism gets tested in real life. In broad daylight, wide awake, no sleep involved at all. Because isolation is isolation, whether it happens at 3 a.m. in a tent or at noon on a hiking trail. On January 8th, 2004, in Whiting Ranch Wilderness Park in Orange County, California, a mountain biker named Mark Reynolds crouched down alone on a trail to fix a broken chain. Alone, crouched low, small. Exactly the silhouette a stalking predator is built to target. A mountain lion took him. His body wasn't found for hours. Later that same afternoon, on the same trail, a cyclist named Ann Hiela rode past. The same lion, still guarding its kill, lunged and locked its jaws around her head, dragging her into the brush. But Ann wasn't alone. Her riding partner, Debbie Nichols, grabbed her legs and refused to let go, screaming, holding on through what she later called a tug of war for her friend's life. Other bikers arrived, throwing rocks, shouting, turning one target into a chaotic, unpredictable group. The lion finally let go and fled. Anne survived. Same predator, same trail, same afternoon. One human alone, crouched, isolated, didn't survive. One human surrounded by people who refused to be quiet did. That's not luck. That's the exact mechanism you just heard, playing out in real time, with real names, proving the theory doesn't only hold at night, it holds anywhere the math of isolation applies. Stack it all up. The deadliest hunter on the planet, a fear response stronger than fear of actual predators. A body chemistry no predator was ever built to read as food. A brainstem relay that keeps filtering threats while the rest of you is dark. A fire that quietly turns a predator's own greatest weapon against it. And a group structure that turns isolation into chaos. It sounds airtight. It sounds like you should never worry again. Except it isn't airtight. And this is the twist that changes the whole picture. Go back to those Sundarbans masks because the story doesn't end where most people stop telling it. The trick worked for a while. Then, slowly, the tigers adapted. Attacks in mask-wearing villages started climbing again. One hunter-gatherer who lived through it put it simply. Before, they thought they understood how the tigers attacked. Now, they don't feel safe anymore, even doing everything right. The deterrent was never a law carved into nature. It was a trick. And predators, especially intelligent, adaptable ones, eventually learn to see through tricks. Fear isn't a permanent setting, it's a habit. Rebuilt every single generation through repeated consequence. And habits that stop getting reinforced quietly start to erode. Go back to Whiting Ranch one more time because the story there didn't end in 2004 either. In 2020, a mountain lion in that same park grabbed a 3-year-old boy by the neck in front of his family. In 2025, a young lion followed 2 cyclists down a trail for 4 minutes before lunging, close enough that they believed that they were about to die. A wildlife biologist who studied the animal called it flatly abnormal behavior. A young lion that, in his words, simply didn't know how to behave around humans anymore. That's the shield cracking in slow motion in the exact same square mile of forest over 20 years. The fear only stays sharp if the lesson keeps getting taught. Every generation of predator that grows up without a hard, consistent consequence for approaching people is a little less convinced by the old warning passed down to it. Here's the part worth sitting with. Because it's easy to hear all of this and file it away as ancient history that has nothing to do with you personally. It does. Every unsecured cooler left outside a tent, every trail feeding, every photo taken a little too close for a little too long is a small withdrawal from an account your species spent hundreds of thousands of years filling. None of those choices feel dangerous in the moment. That's exactly what makes them dangerous. The fear that keeps you alive tonight was never a law of physics. It was a habit passed down by consequence, and habits only survive in the generation that keeps enforcing them. You didn't do anything to earn the safety you're about to fall asleep inside of tonight. But you are. Whether you asked for the job or not, one of the people currently deciding whether the next generation of predators inherits that same caution or doesn't. So back to that tent. Back to that thin sheet of nylon separating a sleeping, unconscious, completely defenseless human from a forest full of things that could end them in seconds. You are not safe tonight because you're strong. You've never been the strong one out there. You're safe because of a debt paid over 10,000 generations by a species that became so consistently dangerous that fear of us got written into instinct itself, and by every predator since that learned the hard way not to test it. That debt is still open. It's just currently in your favor. Whether it stays that way isn't really up to the animals anymore. It's up to whoever's sleeping in the tent.